So, Nicole, thank you so much for coming on the My Story podcast.
You bet.
I am so excited to interview you further. We had a conversation a few weeks ago just about relationships. I'm a relationship coach, so that's what we talk about. And I was very impressed by the way that you articulated what, you had been through, and then how you were able to reflect on what you'd been through, and then sort of turn that into some really juicy wisdom that I think a lot of people would really benefit from, especially people who are either in the middle of going through similar situations that you've been through, or they're just barely on the other side of it, and they're like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go from here? Right? And I think that just the way that you were able to sort of alchemize your situation into something way better and useful going forward would really help a lot of people. So to start at the very beginning to tell your story, tell me about what were some of the beliefs that you ended up as you were going into adulthood and going into the dating world. What were some of the beliefs that you had about romance, about courting, about finding somebody, coupling up? Like, what were some of the things that you remember you were thinking, and those beliefs sort of colored the way you went about that whole, part of your life?
Right. So I was very into the whole fairy tale, romantic, Hallmark movie, Disney princess movie, all of that. Yeah. So I think that did really shape me going into my marriage, but also even like right up until now, I'm just starting to see the difference between that. I'm still a sucker for Hallmark movies. I will watch them as much as I can, but now after everything that I've been through and the healing that I've taken part in, I'm starting to see the difference between what is being sort of fed to us as a society. What my realization is that another person can't make you feel all of those things. You can't buy into that there's someone else out there that's going to complete you, or just change you, or make you happy. Rescue you was a big one.
Yeah, that was for me too, admittedly. Yes. So that you had all that.
I had all of that
type of going into it. Okay, so kind of tell us about your dating life before you met your husband, and how did that play into your ultimate decision to move in his direction?
So I did not date very much. I met my husband I just graduated from high school. Actually, I met him on spring break before I graduated from high school. So I was very young. And you're right. I think lack of dating experience just my parents were very strict, and I love them so much. They did the best that they could for me with the best of intentions, but I feel like I was sort of trying to run away from the constraint and the order. The constraint, the control. Exactly. So I think that's what really drove me into a fast relationship right out of high school. So you had asked me about my dating experience prior to being married. I had a long-term boyfriend in high school as well for 4 years. So I really do have very limited dating experience.
Right. So just the one guy was your experience, and so
that's it.
That's one personality, one set of behaviors and patterns. So you didn't have a lot of experience. So would you say, looking back, would you say that you were naive?
Very.
Okay. And I think that most young girls in our culture at that age are very naive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was it about him?
He had that whole bad boy, really good looking.
Oh, yep, I got that one too. Yep.
Said all the right things, very charismatic, had parents that were very successful in business, so really made it a point to tell me about all of his accolades financially, and I just fell for
Took it. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yep. 100%.
Okay. And so how quickly after you started dating did you get married?
really quickly.
Oh, really? So the love
Too
bombing was
quickly.
on strong.
The love bombing was on fire.
Okay.
For sure.
So how long was it?
Gosh, I graduated high school in 91 and I was married by 93.
Okay.
So, but he proposed
Pretty quick.
within the first 6 months.
Okay.
So
Yep.
all of that was wedding plan, all that
Yep.
time in between was wedding planning.
Okay. And so during that time when you were engaged and you were planning the wedding, was there anything that kind of was a red flag?
100%.
But did you see it as a red flag and ignore it, or were you just completely blind to it?
I did start to see some very controlling behavior, some very erratic emotions.
Kind of up and down.
Down emotions. And I also started seeing that what was presented to me as a lot of financial success in his family businesses were like maybe not what they were all puffed up
Really?
to be.
Okay.
But
So a lot of show, but maybe a lot of debt and...
not debt, just
Okay.
not as successful
Okay.
as he represented them.
So you started to notice that
I did.
while you were planning the wedding. Okay. Did you bring it up? Did you say anything like, hey, this
I
looks...
didn't.
How come?
No.
Do you remember why?
Because I was such a people pleaser, I was accustomed to stuffing down my feelings.
Don't rock the boat. Okay.
Exactly.
So you noticed it. Did you try to ignore it, or do you remember trying to justify it and make up a story like, oh, maybe I'm not seeing it right, or that kind of thing?
Kind of both.
Okay.
To be honest. Yeah.
Okay. And so the erratic behavior, that kind of thing, do you remember how it made you feel when he was displaying the erratic behavior and the up and down emotions?
Confused.
Yeah.
Very confused. And also, like, I did something wrong.
Yeah.
Because I was such a people pleaser, I was like, well, maybe if I just do this or don't do this, that's when the whole walking on eggshells
Yes. Oh.
started.
Okay.
This has to do with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very young person thing to think, right? And children, when they're in chaotic environments, they think, okay, I've done something wrong. If I just correct myself, then I can prevent this from happening again, right? And it just, you end up chasing your tail and walking on eggshells.
Right.
So that was already happening before you walked down the aisle.
It was.
So what was your experience in the week leading up to the wedding?
So he promised me that we had enough money to pay for our wedding.
Okay.
And partnered with a business partner that went bad. And so leading up to the wedding, things were very chaotic as far as how are we even going to pay for the, just scrambling to just try to pay for our wedding, which I feel so embarrassed to say this now, 25, 30 years later, looking back, like, you dummy, why in the world did you marry this guy?
Right.
But
So that experience of, you've set up all the moving parts of the wedding, right? All the vendors, all the different people that have to be paid. And then you're not sure that they're going to get paid. Is that something that you were accustomed to? Is that the way that your family...
No.
Okay, so this was very different.
This was new.
Okay, and so do you remember how you felt about that?
I felt so stressed, but so like, I'm going to figure this out that...
I'm going to get my perfect wedding.
Exactly.
Nothing's going to keep me from being the princess, right?
Exactly. And it was also a distraction for maybe some of the other doubts and things like that
Yes.
I was having. Like, oh, if we just figure this problem out, then
Everything will be okay.
will be fine.
Okay, I understand that one for sure. Okay, and then, but did you notice the difference or the large contrast between the way you were taught to handle commerce or handle vendors or
I did.
paying people? You noticed that contrast?
I did, but I also grew up in a very conservative home. So I thought, oh, well, maybe this is the difference between people that have a lot of money and are very successful in the conservative way that I grew up.
Right, so you start questioning the way that you've been taught.
Right.
And going, well, maybe this is the better way.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm just learning the right way to do things. Maybe this is the way everybody does it, and it's okay to do it that way, even though I've been told not to do it this way.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
I have a lot in common with your story. Okay. So, so you get married. And talk us through that first year, the first few years of like settling into married life, figuring out how to blend each other's lives and living situations, all that. How did that go?
So initially it went really well. We hung out with my family a lot. I hung out with his family a lot. In a way, it's a little bit hard for me, you know, with trauma-based situations, it is a little hard to remember.
Yes, your brain just wipes that for you.
Yes. So I am struggling with that a little bit. I don't remember anything out of the ordinary in the first couple of years.
Okay.
Other than noticing that it wasn't perfect. And I did start to have some doubts about whether or not I did the right thing and jumped into it too quickly, but nothing that I couldn't work out and make better.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So when was it that that there's a point sometimes where you really notice, okay, this, I thought I could manage this. I thought I could, by changing myself, by twisting myself into a pretzel or whatever, I've tried all the things I can to make this feel better. And it's not feeling better. At what point was that for you?
It took a long time.
Yeah.
It took a really long time. We didn't have kids until we were 10 years into the relationship.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of it was, is this the person I really want to have kids with? I had thought about leaving him a few times, but every time I thought about leaving him, he would always love bomb me. And sometimes that love bombing would last a year. In fact, that's what made me decide to have kids. He quit drinking for a whole year. He was a completely different person. And then I finally thought, okay, well, he's changed. And I'm from the Midwest. I was raised very traditionally, where when you get married, and it's for life. Yeah. So I really, truly believe that he had changed. I decided to go ahead and have kids with him. But it was after we had kids that his behavior really changed drastically. And that, to answer your question, that's when I started noticing, like, this is not a me thing. This is not something that I can fix my way out of. We started to see counselors, thinking, and maybe that, looking back, maybe that's what started to open my eyes a little bit to the bigger issues that were happening, was getting therapy and getting some professional help.
Somebody's professional perspective on it. Okay. So, I had a question. What was it? So it was 10 years where it was like, am I in this? Maybe I'm not in this. Well, he's doing a lot better. So that's an astonishing long amount of time from my experience for him. Like you said, he would be keeping up his best behavior for a whole year.
That's a long time.
That's a really long time. And that's not something, usually it's like a 3-month thing, and then they start, relaxing and going back to their old patterns. So that's very interesting, because patterns are the way we know who somebody is, right? And how we know if somebody has transformed into a different version of themselves. And it's not linear. That's another thing. You think it should be, but it's not linear of the progress. So you would see, if I understand you right, you would see a general uptrend of the relationship. It was generally moving in a better direction.
Generally.
Okay, and that's what made you feel safe enough to be like, yeah, we're good.
When I was in it, I was generally seeing an uptrend. Now that I'm looking back at it, I don't think that it was truly up.
So there was some self-deception there.
There was.
Okay, interesting. And so, and you mentioned he had a drinking problem. How soon in the relationship did that show up? Or had it always been and it's just something he hid?
Okay, remember we met in high school,
right?
So that was during my partying phase. So we both went into the relationship drinking a lot.
I've seen that a lot. Yep. And a lot of times when that is the case, you only really know the drunk version of each other,
right?
And
so the fun party, entertaining.
Yes,
exactly.
And then when both of you realize this doesn't look so good for my skin, or whatever the drinking side effects are, and somebody decides to get sober, then you realize, I don't know this person actually. And they don't know me.
100%.
Okay. So you sobered up first, and then you realized, okay, he's not following me. He's not doing it. Did you ask him explicitly? Like, okay, and how'd that go?
He was very defensive, did not see the problem, turned the problem around on me. I didn't quit drinking completely, but as I got married at like 19, 20, or 20 years old. So just for me, naturally, that became less and less a part of my life. I feel like I outgrew it.
You grew out of the young party lifestyle.
Exactly. And so during that first 10 years of our marriage before we had kids,
that's what y'all were up to.
That's what we were up. Well, we were up to it, but I was gradually drinking less. He was drinking the same, and it would become a point of contention in our relationship. And he would be very defensive, turn it around on me, accuse me of having a drinking problem.
Oh, geez. Okay.
His father was an alcoholic, so the fact that he could get through the day without drinking the same, like his father was the alcoholic, he was not the alcoholic. That was his measuring stick. Because he didn't drink to the degree that his dad did, then he's doing a much better job.
Wow.
That I didn't know what an alcoholic was because I didn't know his dad.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So I also wanted to ask you, when you realized, so you said you kind of just grew out of the drinking lifestyle. It wasn't something that, you had to go to meetings for. It was just something you just grew out of. Okay.
I just grew out of it. As I got more responsible in the workplace, as I started to advance in my career, I just naturally, it didn't
appeal any to you anymore. Okay. But he really relied on it. Okay.
And it was more of an anxiety thing for him.
That's what so I come across a lot of substance abuse with not just people I work with, but the people that they're partnered with. And I have seen a trend that people who abuse substances, it's an undiagnosed anxiety problem. And it's unmanaged anxiety. And, well, it's not unmanaged, it's managed, right? They're managing it with the alcohol.
Right.
And it works. And they do it because it works, just only in the short term, right? And in the long term, it doesn't work, and then it also has all these other awful side effects. So the erratic behavior and the erratic emotional, like roller coaster, that's anxiety.
Right.
And so when did you start to kind of notice that he was using it to medicate himself?
Gosh, I don't even know.
It's a hard one, huh?
Yeah. I can't put a finger on.
Was it a slow realization?
It was very slow.
Okay. And so when you would ask him to stop, he would get defensive, and then what would happen?
He would get defensive and drink more, and then punish me.
Oh, how?
Not talk to me for several days, or by that time we had kids, so he would go take the kids somewhere, and I don't know what it's called, but undermine my
your authority with the kids.
So that was all like a form of punishment.
Yeah. Wow. And how long would it last usually?
Usually a couple of days.
Okay.
At least a couple of days.
That sucks. And do you remember how it made you feel?
Again, going back to my childhood, confused, like, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? What do I need to do to make this stop? Just all putting it back on me.
Right. Okay. And so when you asked him to go to therapy, he obviously agreed because you said you both. So how did that go?
It's so important to find the right therapist.
Yeah, that's true.
Because our first couple therapists were, I ended up going more than him, and it was more about compromising in the relationship than actually
Solving problems.
solving what the underlying problems were.
So one of my mentors that says that compromise is actually you take a little bit of pain and I'll take a little bit of pain. And that's not very appealing to me at all.
Right.
And a lot of people, I think it's very cliche when people talk about relationships, it's such a trope, it's all about communication and compromise. And every time I hear people say that, I go, oh, no, it's not.
Should it be?
No, because it is. It's you take a little bit of pain and I'll take a little bit of pain.
Right.
So, okay, but he would go.
He would go, but it was more
to placate you.
It was part of that cycle of abuse. I did something really bad, so I'm going to go to therapy just so she sees that I'm trying. Right. And it
kind of going through the motions.
It was a tap dance,
okay.
Right?
So nothing really sincere.
Nothing.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And so at what point did you lose hope that therapy was actually going to make a difference?
It was after we had 2 kids.
Okay.
And the economy had crashed in 2008. We moved back here down to the valley. I don't know how long we were into the relationship, but that's when I was going to therapy, and that is when I started noticing more and more this is just a facade.
Right.
Nothing's really actually changing. And I started to notice the patterns and the cycles more. But at the same time, I had young kids.
Yeah. That's
and
a tough
I felt
one.
like I was still willing to do whatever it took to keep our relationship intact.
And keep their life stable. Right. Okay. So was it basically just enduring, knowing that I can't fix this. He's definitely not motivated to do his part.
Right.
I'm just enduring until the kids.
I didn't realize that. It took me a long time to get to that point because I was still so committed to staying married that he also had a lot of mental health issues, anxiety, panic attacks.
Those are not fun.
ADHD.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I felt this was my new mission was, well, if we could get these things fixed, then maybe my marriage will be fixed.
Right. Okay.
So it took me a few years.
So was he formally diagnosed with these things?
I don't know that the therapist ever said that to him.
Oh, okay.
But they would tell me that, look,
sounds like
I'm not treating him.
Right.
They would hint at it.
Right.
Nobody ever officially.
Right, because they weren't treating him. They can't diagnose him.
Exactly.
Right. But they'd say, it sounds like
this
is what's going on.
Maybe his dad had this. Does that sound familiar? They would hint at it. I think to try to get me on the right path.
Right. Okay. So then you've got these labels rattling around in your head. And so what were you going to do with those labels? What did you decide to do?
So I kept thinking I would try to talk to him about, you need to get on medications for this. You need to get this managed. So that became my whole mission. That if I could just get him mentally well, then that'll fix everything.
Sure. Okay. And how'd that work out?
You can't make other people do things.
No. Would he pretend and try to placate you, or he just was like, nope, I'm not doing it?
No, he was so anxious about new medications, and really just he was very scared to try to go down that path. So
and he didn't have an alternative in mind. He didn't offer any other...
Nothing.
You're just gonna have to live with me, babe. Okay, so when you had the labels, you tried to do what you could to do something about those labels. He was not on board for that.
Right.
So then what?
So then when I finally understood what I had gotten myself into, I finally decided that I am just going to hang out and try to make this endure until both of my girls graduate from high school.
Okay.
And I only made it until the oldest graduated from high school, because once I realized the gravity of the situation that I was in, it was really hard. The more I learned about what had happened and the narcissism that was involved, the more I understood that personality. It was very eye-opening. It was very validating to understand all of that, but it was also really hard to endure once I understood.
Right, it would likely never ever change.
Personality works. Yes.
Yes. Well, and then so tell more about the understanding that you came to about how that personality type works, that really brought the reality home for you.
So it was my third therapist, and at this time it was just me going, because I realized that I needed to figure out a way to cope with this. If he wasn't going to come and things weren't going to change, I at least needed to figure out a way to handle this situation. So she hinted at, I had never even heard of narcissistic personality disorder. I didn't know what it was. It wasn't like social media now where everyone's a narcissist. Everyone is. It's all over the place. So, and also growing up in a very, I don't want to use the word controlling home, but sort of a bubble. Sheltered. Sheltered is the right word for it. I didn't even know that people like this existed,
or that mental health mental illness was a thing.
No idea. No idea. So my third therapist finally helped me. She hinted at the narcissistic traits, and I went home from that therapy session. I Googled narcissism, and it was like my whole world came crashing down. Like this is exactly all the gaslighting and the cycle of abuse and the love bombing and all of that.
Like somebody looked right into my life and wrote it down.
It was, yes. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It was wild.
That's like a bomb going off.
It was a bomb. Yeah. And it also made it a lot harder to tolerate when I understood what was happening.
What was the hardest part about it once you realized it? Like, what made it so intolerable?
Because up until then, my entire relationship was focused on him. Okay. There was no sense of my feelings or my emotions. So I finally started to process my emotions, and they started to come out.
Yeah. How did that manifest? Were there any physical symptoms? Was there any, like a lot of times, people will have mystery symptoms, and and it's those emotions coming to the surface.
One thing that happened is I gained a lot of weight because I didn't care anymore.
Oh, yeah. That defeated, like, fuck it. Kind of, okay.
But also, I wonder psychologically if I was trying to protect myself and keep him away from me. I think that's what was actually going on. Yeah. Physically.
Right.
I've always been pretty healthy. I always work out. I see a lot of alternative health care providers, so I didn't experience any real physical symptoms.
Okay. But then you started seeing that, I'm an equally important person in this, and my emotions are real, so you start processing them. What did that look like?
A lot of distance. Like, I didn't care anymore. I used to care about keeping things status quo, and then all of a sudden I felt like, I don't care if you get mad at me because I've been enduring this for this amount of time and nothing has changed. Like, no matter what I do, you're still going to get mad and have a lot of explosive anger. So I'm just going to express myself.
Just going to be who I am. Yeah.
Be who I am. If I don't
find out who you are, there's probably a lot of that.
That took until after I got divorced to figure out to
so
start
we'll get there.
That path.
Okay. So you kind of took on this, like, I can't do anything about the way you're there is no rhyme or reason. There is no pattern.
Yes.
You spent a lot of years trying to dial in exactly what is it about what I do, who I am, how I show up that sets off his reactions. And if I can just figure that out, right? And then you get to that point where there's like, oh, there is no formula.
There is nothing.
There is no logical pattern here.
Yes.
And so I'm just going to do whatever I want, and I'm going to allow you to have a feeling and not try to protect your feelings, not try to get you to calm down. I'm just going to let you feel it. How did that go?
So I mentioned I was trying to stay married until my youngest daughter graduated from high school. This was all happening right before my oldest daughter graduated from high school.
And then you made a big change by just being like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to be whatever. So how did he respond to that?
When I made the big change.
Yeah, that's probably, he's like, who is this person? I don't know what's going on here. Yeah.
It shortened the time span because he became, when he realized he didn't have that control over me any longer, and that I was going to do what I felt like was a good idea for my career and my health and, you know, whatever else he was trying to meddle in, he got a lot more angry. And to the point to where my kids would come to me and say, why are you even married to him? Why are you staying with him? You know, it became so obvious in the household. And that my trigger, my turning point was, it was on my birthday. He was very upset with me because he wanted to go out with me for my birthday, and I had to work. And I mean,
it's your birthday. It's not his.
And you're an adult at that. I mean,
you can celebrate tomorrow.
Exactly. It's just things that have to happen. So he was so mad at me that I couldn't drop everything and do what he wanted to do on my birthday, to your point, that he did not speak to me my entire birthday. And I had people coming by, dropping off gifts. My family was coming by, and it was so awkward for my kids. They knew what was happening, that it just accelerated. It accelerated me leaving.
So after that day of not talking to you, then what? Like, walk us through that acceleration. What did that look like?
So then I started talking to my therapist about, I cannot stay. I cannot endure these extra 2.5 years. I am going to start making plans. I'm starting to make my exit plan now. And
how did that go? I mean, were you able to execute that exit plan the way you wanted it? And did he frustrate that more than you anticipated, or just about as much as you anticipated, or?
He had no idea.
He didn't know what was going on.
It was my therapist's suggestion that I work in the background, sort of covertly, in secret, have a plan. I did it all without him knowing. And he was 100% shocked. When he never thought I would ever leave him. He could not believe it. When I finally told him.
So usually once the truth comes out and they realize the court process is really difficult with this type of personality. It wasn't. Interesting.
So I knew it would be. And based on that, I prioritized my mental health, my relationships with my kids over financial gain, over having any part of the business. All of that. I decided I'm better off walking away with nothing than fighting that type of personality.
So you got really clear on what you valued and what you weren't going to value anymore. And then when did your kids know you were planning on exiting?
I did tell them, and they had to keep it a secret.
Oh, that's
I know. In retrospect, that was not a great idea, because I poisoned my oldest daughter's graduation with the fact that mommy and daddy are getting a divorce.
That sucks. And how? But I mean, yes, it's devastating to kids. But how did they? I mean, you said that they had said, why are you still married? So how did they take it? I mean, it's such a jumble. It's so
it's such a mess.
You know, on one side they're like sad, but on one side they're glad for you. So how did they respond?
So at first they were on board with it, But once they started to realize how it was affecting their lives, it turned the other direction. I'm really surprised. If I would have seen this coming and how it would affect them and how he would step up and try to manipulate them after the fact, that I probably still would have done it, but there are a lot of things I would have done differently, for sure.
So he tried to triangulate, and
So first of all, he told the kids that he was going to kill himself.
Oh God.
That he couldn't live without me. So then it became this: is Dad going to be? The focus was off them onto him,
of course.
And then
scary.
he became this Disneyland dad. Took them on all these trips.
Love bombing the kids.
And their friends can come live with him. And he did everything he could to try to keep them under his roof. When I bought a house that was big enough for my kids to come live with me, I was thinking, well, let me get them out of this situation. They don't want to be here anyways. They're seeing all these things, asking me why I'm staying with them. Why don't I just leave? I assumed that they would come.
Was he a roller coaster with them as well? So they had that sense of unpredictability. Like, is Dad going to be cool this time with this, or is he going to freak out? We never know.
Yes.
Okay. So they didn't like being in that environment. They recognized that they were on edge a lot around him.
They did,
and so they were like, "I'm cool with being gone." Okay. Okay, and then you made your exit. Okay, and then in court, you said that it wasn't that big of a deal.
No,
because you basically left everything on the table.
Left everything.
Okay.
We agreed upon it ahead of time, and it was just a matter of signing.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. That's not what you hear about.
Well, that was under the care of my therapist too.
Okay.
I mean, she
probably dealt with that situation.
She did know him because we had family therapy together.
Right.
So she was really vocal about explaining to me how this personality works and how they handle situations like this. So she prepared me very well for it.
That's wonderful. I'm really glad that
me too.
There are therapists like that who can prepare people so they're not blindsided. Okay, so you made your exit, and now you're like, wow, I'm a single woman. Didn't expect this, right?
Right.
So walk us through how that whole process of like reflecting on it, and where do I go from here? Like, how did you figure that all out?
It took a little while to heal from it. My first priority was the kids. Where are they going to live? Why are they not wanting to live with me? Why are they not wanting to do? We were sort of ironing out the custody situation. So it took a little while for me to get to the point of focusing on myself. Maybe a whole year. It was still chaotic. It was still chaotic, exactly. And then about a year later, I figured out, well, I'm ready to go into the dating world. Okay. And I take care of myself. I'm a successful businesswoman. How hard can this be?
Okay. And so how did that go?
It was very surprising how hard it was to put myself out there.
Oh, tell me more.
So I went out on a lot of bad dates.
Okay. Okay.
And I noticed that I was still really attracted to people that were in some way, shape, or form the same personality type as my ex-husband.
Oh. How many days did it take to figure that out?
It took about 3 or 4 tries.
Okay.
For me. Yeah, 3 or 4 different.
So you're pretty quick on the uptake.
People. I was still going through. I changed therapists. I found one that was more focused on just me and this new phase of my life, and that helped. I mean, I've spent so much money on therapy.
Good for you, though, that you found good ones.
If I can help other people with what I've learned, I'm happy to do that. Okay. So through coming in, reporting to her what happened, I don't think it was me that figured out.
She saw the pattern.
She was asking the right questions to see the patterns. And then I started thinking, why am I be unhealed to still be attracting
The same type of
this
person.
sort of personality. And I made a commitment to myself, if I am going to go through all of this pain and rip apart my family and disappoint my parents, not disappoint, but hurt my parent. They had to see me go through this. They had to see their grandkids go through this. If I'm going to go through all that pain, I need to figure this out. I am not going to jump into
I need to have something
relationship.
amazing to show for all this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So then, was that a pivot point for you?
That was a pivot.
Okay, so what did you do from there?
I stopped dating.
Okay. How'd that go?
It was so lonely because I had never been alone.
Yeah.
I went from living with my parents to being married,
Yep.
to starting a family. So just that adjustment from being in a house where we were running 2 businesses, we had 2 kids, 2 dogs, all this chaos, to just quiet,
Just you.
calm, just me and my dog. It was really hard.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Yeah.
It still is really lonely, but I would not change it
Yeah.
for anything, because the healing that I have done during that time.
So yeah, let's talk about that, because when you don't have the other person to focus on anymore and figure them out, you're like, oh, I have to figure me out. And you're doing this sort of like in the 12 steps programs, you're doing this personal inventory of like, what is in me that created. So what was I going to say? Oh, so you're doing this personal inventory of like, what is in me that created this life? This was my life.
Right.
So I definitely created this.
Right.
So how did I do that? And so can you walk us through like, what were the realizations? And it's a sort of an onion process, right? Of peeling back like, and it's there's a lot of disgust I have found in my experience and then my clients' experience when they're doing that inventory, that reflection. They're disgusted with themselves of, ew, gross, this was in me. And I did this. I created this. I allowed all of this awfulness, So what was that like for you? What were the biggest ahas for you in that healing process?
There was a lot of guilt and shame, and I still was not healthy enough to recognize that that's what I was feeling, because I had stuffed down my emotions for so long. And I really became, my biggest realization is that I was how codependent I was.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That was
like,
my
holy
biggest
crap,
aha.
I checked all the boxes.
I checked all the boxes on that, and it wasn't until I could put a name to it and understand codependency.
Yeah, it does help to have a name. Was it your therapist that, or how did you come across the concept?
Random.
Okay.
I met a business contact through networking, and she suggested I start listening to a podcast, and they were talking about this book called Codependent No More.
That's the Bible.
And I always thought, I'm not codependent. I am an independent woman.
Right.
I'm not afraid to be alone.
That's what I hate about the label codependency, because people conflate it with dependent.
Yes.
It's not.
Yes.
It's something completely different. We need a different name for it.
Yes.
Because so many people, they dismiss it offhand. And when I first heard the word codependent myself, gosh, it was probably like 15 years ago. And I was like, oh, that can't be me. But it absolutely was me.
It was me.
And everybody I knew.
I know.
Okay,
Yeah.
so once you had the label and the check boxes.
It really took
like,
understanding that to then start processing my own emotions. And that's when I guess allowed myself to feel sad, lonely, angry, guilty, shameful. Guilt,
Regret.
shame, regret is what I struggle with.
Oh yeah, those are really low vibration emotions. They're like the very bottom. Oh, you still struggle with those?
I still struggle with them. Yeah, my dad passed away a year and a half ago, and just looking back on, I feel like I lost so much time with so many people that were there for me,
Right.
and that were important.
And you couldn't
in my
see
life.
them because he made himself the rock star of your life. Yeah.
Or if I did see them, I wasn't focused on them. I was always focused on him and managing his emotions and keeping him in check and being a buffer between him and the kids.
I call it the airbag.
The airbag.
Everybody's airbag.
That's exactly right.
The peacemaker. Yeah. Okay. So the codependency, a lot of times for myself and then other people that I've coached and people I know, they come across this concept called codependency and they're like, check. Okay. Yep. Right. And they go, okay, so definitely not this. Definitely not this. I don't want this. Okay. So then if not this, then what?
Right.
Because we don't have a lot of models in our current American culture that isn't that. Because if you, like you're saying, the Hallmark movies, all the romance movies, that's that.
Right.
It's codependency. So it's like, okay, definitely not this. I see the dysfunction and I definitely see how all of this causes pain and not peace and harmony. So, but if not this, then what? So what did you come up with the then what?
It is really difficult because in work, some of my codependent traits, nurturing, have made me very successful. And I had to get to the point where I didn't know how to function. I knew I was codependent, but I didn't know how to function not being codependent. So I really swung the pendulum.
I knew you were going to say it. I knew it. Because that's what we do. This is what humans do. We're like, not this? Okay. And we swing the pendulum. So we become this cold-hardened.
Judging.
Yeah.
I was judging all my friends.
Yep, this is what we do. Okay, and then so you swung the pendulum all the way. You became this like not nurturing, very like cold. Like, well, it sounds like you have a problem. Good luck with that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I did.
Yes, and so what I did, same thing as I swung into apathy.
Okay.
So that did not work because
it doesn't work.
People don't like feeling like there's apathy between. I mean, it's just so cold. So, but that was the way that I swung my pendulum. It was just like, how do I protect myself from all of these pitfalls? Right. Apathy is going to do that. I'm just not going to care.
Right.
I'm just not going to have any. I've had way too much emotional investment. I'm not going to have any emotional investment whatsoever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is exactly what I did. Yeah. And that didn't feel good. I also knew that was wrong. So I learned how to be empathetic. Okay. I had to study how to have empathy, not codependency, that there is a separation between a healthy way to acknowledge other people's emotions and to be kind and compassionate. At the end of the day, what I figured out is it is very good to feel other people's feelings or to acknowledge what other people are feeling. The difference with codependency is it hurts you. So it's good to treat people this way as long as it's not hurting me. Right. It's also even good to sacrifice yourself. There's sometimes where you have to make sacrifices of your time and things like that. But as long as it's not a detriment to me, that's the way that I was able to tell myself how to behave, basically.
Well, and what I found too is the codependency, the people that get into relationships with people like your ex-husband were very compassionate people. Women, on the average, are very compassionate. Right. But compassion all by itself is really toxic. Not coupled with wisdom. Wisdom tempers compassion so that, yes, you can feel compassionate, but you don't become a doormat. Yes. Right? Like you said, so it doesn't hurt you. Yes. Compassion untethered by wisdom, you're a doormat.
That's good.
That's really what I've learned. Yeah. And we need to have wisdom.
Wisdom and understanding.
And apply it.
That's the other,
right?
That's the other key.
Right? So, okay. So does that bring us to where you are now, or is there anything that I missed?
That's pretty much where I am now. And I'm just sort of enjoying this space of okay, what do I really enjoy doing? Just
who am I?
figuring
What
out
are my preferences?
Who I am. And I could never understand when I would hear women talking about that. I didn't have my own identity. I didn't know who I was. I thought, oh, that's not me.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I am very.
I remember when I watched Runaway Bride, and she was very codependent. She just molded herself to whatever guy she was engaged to, and he pointed that out to her. I remember watching it very young, going, "That's so weird. Who would do that?"
Do that. I know. And that is not having self-awareness enough to know that, oh my goodness,
we are all doing that. Yeah. Okay. So you're figuring out what your preferences are as not influenced by his preferences, and
or my kids' preferences, or my mom's preferences, all of that.
So it's this journey of like, well, first of all, finding out what you don't like. That's half the battle, and then finding out what you do like. So are you still in that process?
I'm still in that. It's getting easier, but I didn't have emotions either because I swung so far in the other direction.
Oh yeah, okay.
So when I thought about what I would enjoy doing, I felt nothing.
Oh man.
I felt absolutely nothing. So it really has been practice of trying different things, but also recognizing my feelings,
letting yourself experience them and be present for them.
Yes, exactly. So I'm just unraveling that, and it's actually kind of fun. Like, oh, guess what? That's
like a rebirth.
I really like doing.
Yeah. Oh well, I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
It's scary, right?
It is.
It's going into the realm of the unknown, and any creature that has been taken from the realm of the known to the realm of the unknown, it's going to be scary and anxiety filled. But it's also exciting because it's an adventure of exploration. So I'm excited. What do you see in the future? What do you think?
I see big things because it has to be good, and I can tell that it has to be good because I'm feeling very healthy.
Oh, nice.
Right now.
What does healthy feel like? Please explain that, because a lot of people would go, what? What does that mean?
I know. That's the only way I can think to describe it. I feel very mentally healthy. I feel just the fact that I'm feeling feelings is brand new for me. And it feels like, gosh, if I'm feeling this way, what can go wrong? Like, I feel so mentally healthy for the first time ever.
Wow.
In my entire life.
That's so cool. And how is that reflected, that mental health, how is that reflected in what's going on around you, like your circumstances, your life?
It's very helpful with me and my daughters trying to repair our relationship after living through all of that chaos.
Yeah.
It helps me see them for that they have different emotions, and their circumstances were different in their role in this situation was different, and it did affect them differently. So it gives me a more of an understanding and more patience to see what they're going through, and that's helping rebuild our bond in a different way, a stronger way.
What about with like your other relationships and your business and all that? How is that mental health affecting and giving you results in that area?
So I'm also repairing my relationships with my mom, my brother, my sister. Same thing I just said. I just have more awareness for other people's feelings. But in my business also, I would do whatever my clients, I would be a doormat for my clients to make them happy, to with professional boundaries though.
Okay.
I actually behaved a lot more healthy in my professional life than I did in my personal life. But
for doing the people pleasing at work, what were the results that yielded that you didn't like?
You know, it actually yielded me some, that's the hard part, is it actually yielded me some really good results. What I didn't like was what it was doing to me, being overworked.
Burnt out.
Burnout. Exactly.
That is the trade-off. Because people become raving fans when you bend over backwards. Right. And they refer people to you, right? But then you can't perform the services that for their friends
impossible.
because you're burnt out.
Right. It's impossible. And resentment. Now that you bring up the burnout, the resentment comes along with it too. And I would just have a bad attitude towards doing more because I was so maxed out. I couldn't possibly do anything. How could you ask me to do that too?
Yeah.
Because I don't have the capacity for it. So really just
Learning where your capacity is and where the limits
and when
are.
to rest and what actually needs to be done. Like some of the things, being a codependent people pleaser, some of the things I was doing for people, maybe they didn't want me to do them.
Ooh, yeah.
You know, maybe they never asked me to do them.
Oh man, yeah, yep. And when you're codependent, you're not clear on what are your values and what are other people's values being incepted upon you, and you're taking on other people's values as your value because your value is to be pleasing to them,
Make them happy.
So then everybody's values become your values, and we can't value everything.
Exactly.
So when you're pulling back, you're just like you're saying, like, this is what I value, and everything else, somebody else will take care of.
Exactly.
And somebody who really values that will take care of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And learning how to be okay with it and not feel guilty.
Right.
Do you still feel guilty when you have those kinds of boundaries?
It creeps up every once in a while, but I can recognize it. And I
Kind
can
of coach yourself out of it.
Coach myself out of it. Breathe through it. I can apply logic to it now.
Yes. Instead of just all emotion.
Yes.
Which is wisdom coupled with compassion. Very
That's
nice.
exactly right.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share that you think would be helpful for our listeners?
I would just say that it is really important to take the time. It's easy when you're in a relationship that's not good. It's very easy to blame the other person.
Oh yeah.
And think that all your problems are going to go away just by leaving that person. And to recognize your part in all of it.
Right.
You know, whether you decide to stay and make it work, because not all marriages should end.
Right.
But the sooner you recognize your part in the relationship and
Take
work on
responsibility.
yourself, take responsibility, the better it is.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part.
That's the hardest part. I don't know that I would have, you know, if I wasn't put down to my lowest point. I don't know that I would have done this work. I'm so grateful that I have, but I don't think I would have willingly done it.
Yeah. Those rock bottom moments are what inspires that, you know, turn it around and look at me. And yes, blame really does. It's very seductive because it promises you will get to feel how you want to feel.
Yes.
And you keep on doing the blame and you still don't get to feel the way you want to feel.
It's true. Yeah. And it's the path of least resistance too.
Indeed. And we try that out until it doesn't work.
That's right.
Hopefully. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nicole.
You're welcome.
I do appreciate you coming and sharing your story and being vulnerable and honest. And I think that a lot of people will find a lot of value, I hope. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.